Uh, Welcome everybody. Today we will talk about the first what I call special China Today. I usually run a China Today course at both dinner wedding and box sale on Tuesdays, but this one is on Monday, and the content here is different from the normal ones I run. But starting from, I think it's last week, I also make my regular China Today class available on Zoom. So I will be sending out the link for the Tuesdays ones later today. And anyone you would like to join, you're welcome. So let's start today's.
see.
Today, before we start, I'd like to respond to one of the comment from last year from Nathan. This is what he writes. Uh, the first part is a very generous. Thank you very much. And then we might agree that it was perhaps unnecessary for Australian to be, sorry, I can't see that. I have to shift a little bit. To be the one to, perhaps I just minimize a little bit.
That's good.
The one to accuse China of spreading the virus, and there's perhaps some truth in the suggestion that might be we are doing Americans beating in making the accusation. Yep, that's I agree.
Yes.
There have certainly been a number of accusations that the virus may have started outside of China, but I think it depends on what news source one takes the information from and where they especially obtain their scientific data. So from what I know, there are some scientific publications published in very famous medical journals saying that some of the virus, some of the environmental data refers to the virus somewhere else before China discovered the virus. For example, in the samples of blood donation, those people who donate bloods in America, the data go back to as early as late November 2019. There are antibodies of these blood samples, which indicates that these donors has already recovered from a COVID-19. Now remember that China discovered this COVID-19 in approximately 23rd December 2019. So that virus might trace as early as first occurred in China on 8th December 2019. But if we find blood samples as early as late November, that the person has already recovered from COVID-19. That means COVID might have been spreading much earlier than November in America, at least. So that's one environmental data which supports the argument that the virus has been ongoing in the rest of the world. That data is done by the Center for Disease Control from America. So that is the official American government agency publishing the data. Another data we have is from Spain. That one is by testing of the wastewater. So presumably, many cities regularly take samples of the wastewater, the sewer, and then store them in order to trace back any pathogens, etc. So that was traced back as early as maybe June in 2019 in some of the Spain cities wastewater. So there's still a lot to be found. So saying that the virus occurred in China, I think that is a bit premature. So it is not a black and white, and the origins of the pandemic must be found through scientific methods. For the about the artwork, which I call artwork, by a artist in China about our soldiers killing innocent civilians in Afghanistan. So that is the response is, as for the accusation that the Australian soldiers slit the throat of two 14-year-old boys. Now that is, again, I got it from news such as the ABC or SBS. So I think ABC will have certainly very high standard in their journalism. I do hope so. And I read that the story on TRT World. So that's another website which I don't follow. A less than subjective Turkish paper controlled by the dictator uh, Erdogan as a mouthpiece for the Turkish government. Okay, so he read this from a Turkish newspaper, but I read it from, I think it's ABC. So probably there's at least two sources saying that our soldiers unfortunately committed some war crimes. There's no doubt that Australian soldiers are committed horrible war crimes in Afghanistan, and hopefully they will feel the full force of law in Australia. I think everybody will understand that yes, they had committed a crime, they should pay for the crime they did. However, I don't believe the initial inquiry of the army has confirmed that Australian soldiers committed these particular atrocities. Well, the result come out from a Australian Army investigation, so it's not something from the news. It is actually a investigative reports from the Australian Defence Force. So I think that should be quite accurate. Thus, in relationship to picture out of China, whether it's a painting or photo, I think you are guiding the lady to suggest it's art and for art's sake. Well, if people can accept having comedy or parody of actions in China, I think we should be able to accept similar accusation as well. This is a two-sided sword. If we don't want, then perhaps there's no political cartoon anymore. Finally, many commentators suggest that we need to play nice with China.
Oh, of course. We
Sorry?
can't put a true mine into your carrot. This be three.
Sorry, again, please.
Oh, God.
Albert, can I suggest you
answering random.
can you mute everybody?
Sorry? Mute everybody.
Can you mute everybody?
Okay, sorry, I will mute everybody, and if you want to talk, raise your hand or unmute yourself. So let me do that. Participant mute all. Okay, thank you. So I think that will now go away, blocking my view. Whether we let me read the whole thing. After all, we need them more than we need us, and it is our economy that will suffer if we keep poking them in the eyes as you suggest. But is it that the only point? Do we stand by and watch what's happened to Uyghurs in Northwest China? Do we stand by and watch what happens in Hong Kong and possibly Taiwan and the South China Sea? Are we not better than that? Is that all about trade and money? Well, I just made a comment in my Chinese channel on what is called a empire. An empire or a bully is the one who pushes their own will onto others, or make them make our own interests above anything else. That is we will call an empire. An empire is someone who forcing you to do something because they have the ability to do so. So I will think that what is happening in the world, especially in the Western commentary, is very much a bully. What actually happens in China. Many of these commentators didn't know, and they just make up the stories. For example, let me just see whether I can pull up a image for you. That image again is done by the foreign company. I think is that this one? No. Then maybe this one. No. Okay. Unfortunately, I'm going to share this screen. Unfortunately, that screen is in Chinese, but I will explain what is that there. So here is a art done by one of the speaker in the foreign affair for China. First of all, about the accusation that the Chinese are committing genocide in Xinjiang. So what he quoted the data. In the past 60 years, the average life expectancy of the people in Xinjiang raises from 30 years to 70 years. That means the people in Xinjiang over the last 60 years, their life expectancy has increased. And in 2010 to 2018, the Uyghur population in Shenzhen, Xinjiang, increased by 25%, which is 12 times more than the population increase of the Han ethnic groups. In China, most of the people are Han, including myself. Han people represent about 95% of the Chinese population. And the one-child policy applies only to the Han people, and it doesn't apply to the minority ethnic groups. And therefore, while China is still upholding the one-child policy, the Han population growth is about 2%, whereas in Xinjiang, especially about the Uyghurs, their population growth is 25%. So obviously, if China is oppressing the Uyghurs, we won't be able to see their life expectancy increase from 30 to 70 years old. We won't be able to see their population increase by 25% within 8 years. Now, we don't have the current data about 2020 yet, but obviously, China isn't committing genocide. And for the rest, it is a bit of a killer for the Westerns. They say, please don't forget that you slaughter the Aborigines, the history of your slaughtering of Aborigines. And don't forget that there are still serious racism and human rights problem within your country. So that is the response from China's official response. Whether it's true or not, up to people to judge. At the moment, China welcome you to go to Xinjiang or Tibet. Anybody going there will not be blocked. So if anyone of you like to travel to China and visit Xinjiang or Tibet, you're welcome to do so, and there will be no interference. You can travel on your own. You buy your train ticket, go there, find a place to live, and then interact with the local people and find it out. And that is what the Chinese government is asking the rest of the world to do. If you don't believe the data, do it. Have a look yourself. At the meantime, while the Western countries are criticizing China on the Uyghurs policy, the Muslim countries has sent a delegation to visit Xinjiang to investigate the problem. And they come out and say that there's no genocide in Xinjiang. Okay, I will stop this share and then go back to our main discussion. This one. So whether we there's a problem with Uyghurs. That is up to you. The other issue is about Hong Kong. At the moment, Hong Kong had just arrested 47 pro-democracy traitors, as they call them, and they will be going through the court today. So whether they will be allowed to go to bail out, I don't know yet, because at the moment while we are speaking, the court session probably haven't started yet. They are expected to start the court session at has started at around 1 p.m. our time. So they are still going through the court. So whether they will be allowed the bail and come out, we don't know yet. But obviously, that is a main issue, and I probably will talk about that in next week's normal China Today class. Okay, going back, continuing. Yes, I agree. Democracy is the best way to resolve the situation, but the UK thought the same of the Nazi Germany, and when Germany took over Austria and invaded, I can't pronounce that word, too difficult for me, and that didn't up with the desired outcome. Well, at the moment, China, since it's open and reform in the last 40 years at least, it has not sent out an army to invade any country, zero. Whereas what we have seen is America has been sending its armies to the rest of the world and causing a lot of headaches for many, many people, including Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. So just don't point finger to China without looking at yourself as well. So that's my comment to the response, and I now will be able to go into the main topic today. It is the 14th five-year plan. China has just put out the directives of this 5-year plan, and the details has yet to be discussed. When I proposed this topic, I thought by now we will be able to see its detailed plans. Unfortunately, this year is a bit slow. They will have this plan discussed in mid-March. Still 2 weeks to go. So probably I will come back to this issue when I have more information. And if the information I'm presenting today is wrong, then I will include it in the third term, because I've already decided on what I will talk about in the second term. So, but if the directives and the details plan are almost the same, then probably we won't do that. So I will be looking at what is the initial plan boundaries for this 5-year Chinese 14th five-year plan. Since 1953, China's 5-year plans has been the single most important guiding document signaling the policy direction for the country's future economic and social development. Planning is a key characteristic of the nominally socialist economies, and one plan established for the entire country normally contains detailed economic development guidelines for all its regions. In order to be more accurately reflect China's transition from a Soviet-style command economy to a socialist market economy, the name of the plan changed from plan to guidelines. So it is better to describe this 14th five-year plan as 14th five-year guidelines. That would be a much more accurate description. But I will stick with this 5-year plan because there are too many 5-year plans and we have only a few guidelines. So probably we stick better to using the word plans. The Soviet approach to the 5-year plan started in 1953 to 1957, and the key tasks highlighted in that plan were concrete efforts to construct some large to medium-sized industrial projects. So it is a top-down managed economy. lay out the primary foundations for the China's socialist industrialization. Now, the China was still a agricultural country until about 40 years ago. So the problem is, you want to modernize, you have to go through industrialization first. So back in 1953, China is already planning ahead to be industrialized, but obviously it doesn't work out until China open up. Develop agricultural producers cooperatives to help in the socialist transformation of the agriculture and handicraft industry. That plan was a disastrous. It caused a famine shortly after the first 5-year plan. So we have a so-called 3-year hunger in China immediately after that. The main reason is that the officials over-reported their produce quantity, and that caused a lot of problem. Facilitate the socialist transformation of private industry and commerce. So that is the first 5-year plan, which doesn't work out well. But in some case, there are some progress. For example, the steel production in 1953, it was 1.35 million tons. By 1957, it increased to 5.35 million tons. So there is a very large change in steel production. Coal production increased almost, which almost doubled. Both industrial and agriculture rose by 30%. Heavy industry turned 6.4. Grain production increased, but unfortunately, the grain production probably is wrong from my personal experience. During the time I was living in Hong Kong, and my father run a small shop selling noodles. We don't cook, we sell noodles for family to bring home and cook. So it is not a cafe type of noodle shop. We are really selling only the noodles. And we were inundated by requests to send food back to China because of the famine. So that is very vivid in my mind, the period where China's have a huge famine throughout the country. Two major problems, according to whatever who write that: the agricultural production couldn't keep pace with industrial production. The plan regarded gross industrial output accounting for 70% of the gross output of the industry. The problem is that cities where industry are located require food from the surrounding rural areas. So basically, rural areas supply the needs for the cities, and cities where the industry concentrated. So when you put your emphasis only on the city, on the industrial development, then very likely the rural areas are being neglected. When the officials in the rural area overclaim the actual production of the produce by a very large margin. What I mean is, instead of saying my grain production increased by say 1%, 2%, they are claiming that grain production has increased by 10 times, 20 times, 50 times, or even 100 times. So when the central government noticed that from the report saying that the countryside has a lot of food production, so they said, okay, in that case, we can increase the supply of that food to the cities by a few percentage. So let's say You claim you have increased by 10 times. Let's say we increased by 2%. Well, unfortunately, that 2% is based on the inflated 10 times. So suddenly the tax on the farmer becomes 20% of the real production, plus whatever that is already needed to support the center. So suddenly the major part of the food production was shifted to the city, and the rural community is left with hunger, and that is why we have a large-scale famine. Whereas the central government didn't realize that, and even when investigations are being sent to rural area and find that out, Chairman Mao refused to believe it and set the messenger that is what's wrong during that time. The investment increase, that is not important. So let's jump over to the 14 plan. So the first 5-year plan, to put it lightly, isn't successful. But after that, the China has been very successful in implementing their 5-year plans. Now we are in the 14th 5-year plan, which will cover this year, 2021 to 2025. So they held a meeting last year in 2020, October 26 to 29, and that's when I prepare for the talk for first term. So I think, oh, that's a good idea. When they talk about the 14th 5-year plan, by now I will have all the details. But unfortunately, it doesn't work out. But anyway, they started this usually in their fifth plenary sections of their Central Committee of the Communist Party, which is a 3,000 people meeting. So the plan is drafted against a backdrop of the worsening U.S. and China relationship. We know that the last U.S. president, Donald Trump, started the trade war with China, and the relationship worsens. And again, also again, the backdrop of the COVID-19. Overall, the documents signal no significant changes to the policy direction. Well, if the direction is successful, why change? But instead, saw the progression of many familiar themes, so it moving in the same direction. One of the most interesting thing about the 14th 5-year plan is that it doesn't state the growth target. In the last 5-year plans, China has always stated the growth target. How many times the economy, or how many percent the economy will have to grow within that 5 year. And the government have been working very hard to achieve that target. But this time, this is the first time for a long time, there is no specific growth target. This could reflect a more flexible approach by the leadership and an increased focus on other metrics, such as employment and quality growth instead of the overall GDP growth. So they are not singly focusing on one metric. Rather, they probably will be looking at more metrics for measuring the success of the 14th 5-year plan. Another significant point about this 14 5-year plan is also set at the same time another 15 years plan, which is called 2035 vision. It is a midterm vision to focus on socialist modernizations. Now, this is the second 15-year plan. This 15-year plan meant to put China into a moderately prosperous society. Now, with the trade tension and the collapse of the supply chain due to the COVID-19. So China's economy growth had to switch from a single focus on external markets into what they call a dual circulation and secure supply chains. Dual circulation means there's emphasis of the economy within China, the domestic economy. That is the one circulation. And of course, the other circulation China will not give up is actually selling the products to the rest of the world. So that is the second circulation. So they're talking about dual circulations. The economy will put more focus on domestic economy. That is again, the background is the trade tension between United States and China. So a lot of business is pressured to get out from China, from the United States, especially under Trump, in order to increase the employment in United States. But I think, unfortunately, it won't happen. For the simple reason that the average or the GDP per capita between US and China is still a factor of about 3 to 4. So per capita wise, the average GDP of in United States is 3 times higher than China. And therefore, if you move the job back to the United States, is the business able to afford a 3 times increase in the production cost due to the wages average? That is a big problem for the business to consider if they want to move the production out of China. I would suggest it will only force these international companies to move the production out of China, yes, but to cheaper region like India, Philippines, etc., rather than moving back to US mainland. And therefore, that pressure will be felt by China, but the benefits probably won't be felt by the American people. That's only my view. So Xi Jinping, in order to counteract this one, they are now emphasizing on the domestic economy. The dual circulation model plans to transfer the Chinese economy to a reliance on internal circulation, the Chinese domestic production circle, as well as the external circulation, the foreign production circle, the market, the market to the rest of the world. During this trade tension, we also noticed that there is a lot of tension about technology. Of course, China is accused of the doesn't respect of so-called intellectual properties. Yes, for almost all countries during development, they will try to steal, copy, whatever foreign technology in order to advance their industry. But at a certain point, most countries will start to implement stricter and stricter intellectual property protections as their own innovation increase, as their own patents numbers increase, as their published papers increase, then they will be stretching more and more on protecting their own intellectual properties, self-interest. So today, I think China's effort in protecting intellectual property is almost the same as most developed countries. There are still areas to improve, but it is closing in very close. China already produced more patents than the rest of the world. And the second largest patent producer in 2019 is United States, and China overtook United States. I think it's 2017, something like that, not too long ago, but it's already about twice the amount of patents produced by China than by United States. So that is that's why I see Chinese intellectual properties protection will increase. Another accusation of China is that when foreign company want to do business with China, they had to go through a joint venture with Chinese capital so that they will establish a joint venture company in China and sell to China. But again, that regulation will be loosened up, I think, in the near future as China want to attract more talent and more company invest in China. But yes, it has been like that before, but I think that policy will start to change in this 5 year. The so-called new economy has been constantly growing about the GDP average in recent years, already represent about 50% of the total GDP in 2019. That means the domestic economy. Therefore, new technologies appear to be ready to spearhead growth in the coming years. Another key factor is strengthening the domestic demand. The first one is about the high-tech industry. China want to be able to have a all-round skills in all set. Because at the moment, for example, we know that United States is banning Huawei, the mobile phone company, from using some of the silicon chips from US manufacturing. And that caused a lot of pain to Huawei. So, and ZTE as well. So both these two companies has been banned by US governments from obtaining silicon chips from United States. And they also banned other companies to produce silicon chips on their behalf to sell to these companies. So that is causing a lot of pain. China once realized that they will concentrate to overcome that problem. But when China overcome that problem, I think the United States companies will suffer because after all, I think it is too short-sighted. Another point is about the environment. China has been doing a lot of work on the environment. The main driving force is actually the people in China. When in 2028 or before 2028, around 2026, around that time, the air pollution in China is very bad, really, really hard, and people have to wear masks, not because of COVID, but because of poor air quality. But for the 2008 Olympic in Beijing, the government managed to produce a blue sky for Beijing by closing down a lot of the industries around the Beijing capital. And miraculously, there are blue sky. Then the Chinese people suddenly realized that if the government put the effort in it, pollution can be controlled. And therefore, they started to demand the government to improve the environment. And from then onwards, the environmental protection has been one of the key objectives of the Chinese government. And in terms of for the global climate change, China promised to peak its carbon dioxide output before 2030. 2035. No, before 2035. Sorry, before 2035, China would have peaked its carbon dioxide emission, and then it would start dropping. And China will obtain the carbon neutral by no later than 2060. So by 2060s, the amount of carbon dioxide produced by China will be captured by China so that it will have a net zero carbon dioxide emission at latest in 2060. That is Chinese commitment to environment. In terms of energy, China will continue to develop hydropower, especially along the Yangtze River. Another 60 gigawatts of hydropower will be developed in the Tibet region, the upper stream of the Yangtze River, which it has a very large drop in height. That is a very large potential of producing hydroelectricity. So where is this Tibet? I think from what you see here is the Himalaya region. In the Himalaya region, this is Nepal and India over here, Bhutan here. And on top of that red line is China. And that is the river we are talking about, passing through Lhasa. So they are going to build dams in the upstream of this river. Unfortunately, this river will turn around and flow into India and then eventually form part of its main river system. So building up dams in the upstream, although it is within China's territory, has huge impact on the water supply in countries like Bhutan and India. So there will be a lot of negotiations between countries for this to go ahead. The interesting about this is it has a huge height difference, over 500, over almost 3,000 meters drop. So there is a lot of potential energy there to be harvested. So if China can maintain the same water flow, only capture the potential energy, then it will not have any impact on the water flow downstream, while generating a huge amount of energy for Chinese use. That is what I hope the Chinese government will do. The PRC government has established a Yalong Jingpao Grand Canyon National Reservation, which will try to restore the restoration of the area. The size of the dam will generate 50,000 megawatts or 50 gigawatts, twice the amount of the output of the Three Gorge Dam, which is the largest hydropower station in the world already. So we will be looking forward to seeing even a larger hydroelectric plant built in China over the next 5 years. So the key features of this 5-year plan includes boosting the technological innovation, which China understand has to go that way. Now, China started in a low skill, low technology manufacturing, but as the economy progresses, its GDP per capita also increase. So that means the wages of Chinese workers also increase, making the low-end production not viable in China. So the low air production will eventually move out of China and move into regions which have a lower per capita GDP. In order to prepare for that one, we need Chinese workers to upskill. Their skill level have to increase, as well as the factories have to innovate in order to capture higher values in their value chain. You are only capturing the lower value, you can only produce that much for the average worker. Now, let me give you an example, is the Apple Watch. Apple Watch typically sell as about 400 to 500 Australian dollars, the whole watch. The Apple Watch is assembled in China. The assembly represent about $2 of that $400. That means the Chinese it didn't capture even 0.5% of the total value of that watch. So in order to capture that value, China company have to behave like Apple, design the watch and sell the watch themselves. For Apple, their profit margin is about 60%. So China want to move up to that level to capture 60% instead of 0.5%. And that's where innovation comes in. You have to innovate in order to do that. Continual modernization of the industry. It is also driven first by that innovation requirement. The second is also driven by the human labor supply. Now we know that China has been running a one-child policy and its average growth. Although, as I said in the response earlier, the Uyghurs have a 25% growth of population by between 2010 and 2018. But the overall, the majority of the Han growth about 2%. So with a birth rate of about 2%, it is not able to sustain a continuous growth. That means China will be running out of human resources. How to counter for that? Well, using robots or using industrial modernization techniques. Moving the bulk of the workers upskill, leaving the lower skill work for the robots to do. And that's one way of doing it. And modernization also involves other things as well. For example, you need to have an infrastructure to support the movement of goods, the movement of parts, and the support of energy to allow the factory to produce. And it is also involved with digital development, like when you're using robots, there's a lot of artificial intelligence involved. And therefore, it will have to also accelerate the digital development of the economy. All these aspects have to be taken into account. Another aspect they have to take into account is the aging of the population. As the birth rate so low and the life expectancy increasing, that means there will be more and more people entering the retirement age and beyond. And therefore, the aged care industry will be a major industry for China to tackle. How can you provide sufficient aged care service to the aging population is another big issue China had to face. If not in this 5-year plan, probably in the next 1 or 2 5-year plans, they have to start to address that problem as well. This come back to the dual circulation strategy. So let's move on the next one. Deepening reform. That is a word we hear very often in China. China try to deepen reform because after all, it is the opening and the reform which takes China to this level. So this is somewhere they want to do. So they are now plans include giving full play to the decisive role of the market in allocation of resources. They do believe in market economy, including the land, the labor, technological knowledge, capital, and data, etc. So they are trying to move to a more open society. Another big area is the rural areas. As I had said before, the rural areas and the urban areas still have a very large income gap. If we want to increase the overall GDP of the country, you can put effort into the urban development and make the urban the wealth creation centers and creating new wealth and therefore increase your GDP. But another way to do it is actually increase the wealth of the rural area. The rural area represents a much larger population than the urban population. At the moment, it is about a uh, 30 to 70 split. About 30% of the Chinese are living in urban centers, whereas 70% is living in the rural areas. That ratio is expected to increase to about 40 to 60. So Chinese urban centers are going to grow. But at the same time, if we can increase the wealth of the rural area, especially by alleviating poverty, and there is a huge potential to create wealth. So that is another way to increase your GDP by focusing on the rural development. Optimize the spatial distribution of land. China China's land use is very interesting. I think sometime later on, probably in third term, I would like to discuss the geology of China. Simply put, about 90% of Chinese population live on about 1/3 of the land of China. The other 2/3 are almost empty. And among that 1/3 area, many of them concentrated within about 10% of that 1/3. So again, the population is not distributed among the Chinese land evenly. So that is another way of increasing or improving the country is by better make use of all this land. Development cultural industries. This is easy to do. I hope. China recognized about 55 ethnic minority groups, and every of these 85 minor ethnic groups have their own special cultural heritage. So there is a lot of potential to harvest these cultural heritages and make it into a value generating industry. So they are talking about development cultural industries. Again, that also will provide a conservation protection of these minor ethnic groups. Achieve a higher level opening up. Again, opening reform are the two key mechanism for the Chinese to increase its wealth. Promote people's livelihood, again, by increasing the overall value generated by individuals, the overall value generated by the country will increase. So that is, again, as I said, China has a aging population, and therefore there are a lot of areas China need to focus on. National security, that is, no country want to be invaded by another country. So national security is very important. Without a secure national security, basically your people cannot have a stable environment to develop. Modernize defense. It will continue to invest in its army and defense. Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan relationship. I don't think there will be major policy change towards Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan within these 5 years. They will still continue to try to maintain prosperity and stability in these 3 major areas. After all, Chinese main focus is still the 2035 long-term plan. So let's let's go into this 2035 vision. What are they trying to say? Chinese leader envision a strong, technologically advanced country leading innovation and new industrialization. While there is an intention to strengthen military capabilities, there's also the characterization of a peaceful China. Following China's historic commitment to carbon neutrality by 2060, there is also a focus on eco-friendly way of life in beautiful China with peak emissions in 2030 and steady declines thereafter. So these are their long-term view, and that's why China is talking about by 2060 it will achieve carbon neutrality. The vision is that China will become a moderately developed economy by 2035. Now, what does it mean is complicated. One of the simplest way is to say by then, Chinese economic size will be 3 times 2020. So in 15 years, they want to triple their economy from a per capita 10,000 US dollars to a per capita 30,000 US dollars. If they want to do it, then they will need an average growth rate of 7.6%. At the moment, we think the Chinese growth rate at best is about 6%, 6.5%. The estimated GDP growth for China for 2021 is 6.3%. So there is still a large margin from that 7.6. So how can they achieve 7.6 on average is still a very large question there. How they can do that, we don't know. For example, here from the Standard Charter, which is a bank, we expect China's growth to average 5.5 to 6.0 from 21 to 25. So that would be 5 years off. And then you expect it to lower to 5%, and then to another lower to 4.5%. So basically, the analysts at Standard Charter doesn't believe that China is able to achieve that 3-time growth. And I think this is a very large demand. So I don't know whether China can actually has this threefold increase in GDP. Broadly outlined in the late October 20, the new plan aims at China's becoming a moderately developed country. Okay, again, the same thing. Some targets. Again, it will put emphasis on the high-speed rail. It is expected to double the mileage of the high-speed rail and by 2030. So it will have about 84% increase, so about double. The railway, not only the high-speed rail length will increase, the normal railway network will also increase by about 37%. And will add about 162 civilian airports over that period. So again, there is another about 30% increase in the number of airports. the technology again is the center of the whole plan. And they are planning for a magnetic levelated train systems of speed of 600 kilometers per hour. And then later on with vacuum tubes, the so-called super loop. China is already doing that already, investigating. And in particular, the capital of Guangdong, which is just next to Hong Kong, want to build a magnetic levelated train between Canton and Beijing. And if they are successful doing that, then they will reduce the travel time between Guangdong and Beijing using high-speed rail by half, almost half, from about 8 hours to about 4 hours, a little bit over 4 hours. But again, once they released that plan, there was a lot of criticism saying that the technology isn't there, and then how can you plan with something which doesn't have the technology yet? Not to mention building it. Maybe it takes a few years to plan, and then how about building it? So they retracted that plan, but at least the planners in major cities are thinking about that already. And Beijing, China is a huge import of energy and resources, including oil, iron ore, grains, and LPG. So in order to remain energy sufficient, China needs to be able to ensure that all these transportation routes are secure. So they don't want to be interrupted by whatever to stop their energy import. The international environment is becoming increasingly complex. Well, the international obviously change almost every 4 years when the US president has a change in their president. So international environment do change, to keep on changing. So that is my presentation. And now I will stop the share and then open up for discussion. So if you want to ask a question, please unmute yourself and then you can go ahead and ask any question. So anyone? No?
Albert, what are your views on Taiwan? Do you think China will have a go at Taiwan in the next 5 years?
No, I don't think so.
What about the next 10 years?
I can't say about that, but I don't think China will have a go with Taiwan in the next 5 years because China still have a lot of things on their own plate. They won't have sufficient energy in the leadership, at least, to focus on such a complex international hot potato as taking Taiwan back by force. And I also don't see the Taiwan political system will voluntarily join China because nobody is going to give up your power to join somebody else. So
and freedom.
It depends on how you define freedom. I will argue that the people in China itself enjoys quite a bit of freedom, which a lot of Western countries can't enjoy. Now, freedom is quite different. For example, most Chinese, even the rural poor, do not have a mortgage, so they have financial freedom. Whereas a lot of us, even middle class, do have a mortgage. Almost our children, maybe we are retired, we are a special group, so most of us probably doesn't have a mortgage. But think about our children. Most of them have a mortgage. So they are not financially free in a sense. But in China, almost 80% people doesn't have any mortgage. They are financially free. That is one kind of freedom. Western country probably is not as free as China. Another freedom is freedom from violent criminal acts. China has a lot of safety. You can walk. A beautiful girl can walk out into the street at midnight, and she can be totally safe, and she knows that she will be safe. Now, can we do that in some part of the Western countries? For example, in Chicago or New York, will a lady dare to come up and walk in the street at midnight or after dark? Well, we understand that there's a significant crime rate there. And for another issue is the amount of people killed by guns in United States is order of magnitude above that in China. Obviously, Chinese doesn't allow gun ownership. That's true. But at the same time, that makes China a much safer country. So the freedom of security from violent crimes is another freedom we can enjoy. Now, people may argue, okay, what about freedom of speech? Well, as long as you are not advocating of pulling down the Chinese government, you can say whatever you want, including criticism of the Chinese government. Chinese people criticize their government a lot as well. For example, as I say, shortly around 2008, when the Chinese people realized that we can have a blue sky, they started criticizing the government and put pressure on the government to improve the environment. And by now, most cities in China can have blue skies about 300 days in a year. Oh, yeah, there are some days when the air just isn't moving. Okay, so there are some days with very bad air pollution, but that is a significant improvement compared with 2008 or thereabout. So there are freedom there as well. But again, it all depends. In terms of political participation, do the Chinese people vote? The answer is yes. It's not no. The Chinese people do vote, but the voting system is quite different from our voting system. Our voting system, we vote for the top political figures, almost top, okay? We vote for example, the political parties represented in our federal parliament, okay? And then the party which has the maximum number of parliamentarian in the house will form government, and we don't have a say about who is our prime minister. The prime minister is determined by the political party which is in power. So we already see that, for example, during the Labour time, Calvin Rudd and then Julie Gillard and then Calvin Rudd again. So they are changing their political. We are changing our political leaders. We don't have a say. The say is we only have a say to elect and then eventually make Labour into power to govern. Okay, so it is indirect election in a way, but we are able to elect very top. Whereas in China, the election is at the very bottom, not at the top. Very, very bottom. The lower it goes, the more people involved. In the governing body, the CCP, had about 90 million members. 90 millions, okay? And these 90 millions participate in being voted to, okay? So the number of people voting it, we are talking about maybe a billion, okay? Almost a billion people vote in China. What they do? Well, in a small village, for example, we need a village chief. So the village chief is anybody who got at least 5 signatures, then you can stand for office. And there's also one rule. The number of people standing for office must be greater than the number of places available. So if we have one village chief, you need at least two people to stand for office, and all the villagers will be participating in that vote and to select their village chief. Okay, so we have over 1 million this kind of very low level officials. These low level officials votes for the next level up, the county level. In the county, there may be a few of places there, and then all the villagers within the county, not the villager, the people in the village, is the villager chiefs will vote for their leaders within the county, and the county's leaders will vote for the leaders of the province, and the leaders of the province will vote for the national delegates, and the national delegates will vote for the standing committee, and then the standing committee will vote for the core, which is about a 7-person core, which includes, of course, the president of China. So Chinese voting system is the other way around. They start voting at the bottom and then let all the selected members to vote for the next level up, and then the next level votes for the next level up, and then there it goes. And by the top, when they go to the national delegates, it has a membership of, at the moment, 2,980, almost 3,000 members in the National Congress. And that 3,000 people votes for a standing committee of around 150 people. And that 150 people is the main governing body of China. Among these 150 people, of course, is the central core, which consists of Xi Jinping, Li Keqiang, etc., etc. So yes, China also had the freedom to vote. So it depends on how you measure freedom.
Well, I'd like
Yes.
to make a comment about it's me. You were talking about freedom and security and all that sort of thing, but we hear a lot about the Falun Gong. Would you like to comment on, why they're not as free as the rest of them?
Falun Gong is considered a cult.
Yeah.
Because the both two things there. One is their practice. They advocate some very superstitious ideas, including not seeing a doctor when you have illness, which cause a number of casualties, which really make the Chinese government mad. These are curable disease, and Chinese government will be able to provide it by the cure. But because of these people in Falun Gong, I believe that their leaders have this magical miracle ability to cure them without seeing a medical doctor. That is one thing the Chinese government cannot accept. That's number one. The number two is that these Falun Gong people trying to amass a following and produce a political force which opposes the policy of the Chinese government. And for individuals to to comment on the Chinese government's policy. That's fine. But when you organize into a large number of people using this as a political force to force the government to come down, then it is not right. So the Chinese government doesn't allow that as well. So that's number two. Number three is the Falun Gong is a political party in a sense, amassing foreign inputs. Now, no country will welcome external political force to influence their national policies. For example, when we have an election, we don't want any country, including China, to interfere in our own political system. So are the Americans. For example, we had so-called the Russia Gate, claiming that the Russia interfered with their election in 2006. So Chinese government obviously doesn't want anything like that. Falun Gong is liaising with foreign interests to try to pull down the Chinese government. And of course, that is not allowed. And therefore, they are considered a cult, and then it's being forbidden operation within China. But unfortunately, Falun Gong is very active in Taiwan as well as Hong Kong. So you can see that while in mainland China, Falun Gong is illegal, but they didn't stop their operation in Taiwan and Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a Chinese territory anyway. Yes, please.
Albert, does your comments extend to the persecution of other religious groups like Christians and Buddhists and Muslims?
No, Chinese government didn't oppress what you say the Buddhists and the Christians. The Christians, for example, the Muslims are still practicing Muslim in the Muslim areas. Almost every city in China, even those cities outside of the Muslim regions, have a mosque. So there are a lot of mosques around, and the Muslims are still practicing their Muslim faith. The only limitation to that one is, there are days for the Muslim where they will fast. The Chinese say, okay, you adult fast is your problem. But when their children is in school, school will still feed their children normally, and you cannot force the children to fast because that will inhibit children's health. So in that sense, people are criticizing China as oppressing the Muslim practice. But the Chinese government said, no, you send your children to school to learn, and if they're at school, you may have a majority of Muslim, but the Chinese, by the way, all Chinese schools are boarding schools, except except some of them in the cities. Most Chinese schools, primary and secondary, are boarding schools. The Chinese government provide all the meals to the children at school free, including their free education. I think it's 9 years now. 9 years free education. So this 9-year education include accommodation and food. And the Chinese government say, okay, we will treat all students the same. Whether you're Muslim or not, there will be no difference. Of course, in terms of the, is the halal? The food the Muslim eats, some
Yeah,
Halal.
Halal food.
halal. Yeah.
halal food. The food prepared by the schools is by a cooking lady or a group of cooking ladies. And what the food is prepared depends on these ladies. So if that lady is a Muslim, she probably will provide halal food for the whole school. And in that sense, every children, whether you're Muslim or not, will have to eat the same thing. Of course, the same thing do have a choice, but depending on the size of the school, some school is very small. Let's say a school in a village, which may have, say, two children, one teacher, two students. The teacher still have to cook for that two children. And then whatever is cooked, they will be shared together. So in that kind of school, you don't have a choice. But in the larger school, for example, the school with 1,000, 2,000 students, the student will have a little bit of choice. Usually the main thing like rice, you have no choice. But for the dishes to go with the rice, they will probably have a choice, 2 out of 3, or you will like all the 3, but smaller portion, and they will usually have a fruit and then a soup. So that is the normal meal in school. But that will be free meals per day. Yes.
Sorry, just a corollary of that was, what about Buddhists and Christians and things? What does the CCP have against those particular groups? Does it see it as something impinging upon its own authority, or?
Now, in terms of Muslim, in terms of Buddhist, okay, Buddhist monk. So there are Buddhist monastery in China. I think everybody learn about the Kung Fu monastery. Okay, this kind of monastery operate in China, or everywhere. Of course, there's 1 or 2 monastery which is particularly attractive. They attract a lot of followers. That's fine. No problem. That's happening in China. In terms of Christians, there is one rule. Is that called priests? The appointment of priests will have to be endorsed by the Chinese government. So that will be a consultation between the Vatican and the Chinese government in order to appoint a priest in China. So the priests themselves will need endorsement. So basically, it's the veto rights rather than a nomination rights. The Chinese government want to maintain a veto right to the priests or to the leadership of the churches. That's true. And it has been negotiated with the Vatican. And I think the negotiations has completed. So I will see that the priests in China will be endorsed by the Chinese government. But other than that, the churches are going ahead. Yes, please. I can't see your name, sorry. So I see you raise a hand.
Okay, this is Hugh here.
Yep.
Albert, getting back to the 5 and the 15-year plans that you were describing, I would argue that any superpower probably needs 4 things in place for it to be a sustainable superpower. One is human resources and a talent base to fuel, and examples were given in terms of, for example, the shift of 10% of the rural population to the cities, presumably become factory fodder, better trained, etc., etc. That's one. A second is access to groundbreaking technologies, and you gave several examples of that to get a differentiation and a market advantage, both domestically and in the world. The third thing is access to markets, and you described both the internal domestic market as well as the access to external markets through the Belt and Road and so forth. The fourth area, which probably a superpower requires, is a robust financial system. I don't recall hearing anything about what China is going to do about its financial system, whether that be in terms of exchange rates, in terms of liquidity, how to raise capital, how to manage capital, interest rates, and so forth like that. Do you have any insights in regard to that fourth component?
Well, at the moment, the US dollars is the world's reserve currency as well as trading currency. And China is the second largest holder of US government bonds. The first one is Japan. Japan is the largest holder of US government bonds. China is second. And China being second just by a little bit, not that much, by about 5% less than Japan. So that is the current situation. But there's a very strong difference here. Over the last year, 2020, the US increased its government debts or increased its government bonds by about $2 to $3 trillion US dollars. Most of that increase is absorbed by Japan and the rest of the world. China continue to decrease its holding of the US government bonds at a very slow rate, at about 3 to 4% per year. So China has been lowering its holding of US dollars in a long trend. The long trend started at around 2012, about that time. China started reducing its amount of holding of the US government's bonds. So I don't see that reversing. You're right. In terms of the Chinese currency, it is not yet a international exchangeable currency, and I don't see that being changed in at least the next 5 to 10 years. It will still need a lot of work for the rest of the world to accept Chinese currency being a major reserve currency. At the moment, in terms of from the IMF, Chinese currency as the world's reserve currency is only sitting at about 2 to 3%, whereas in terms of the overall worldwide government's reserve currency, about 60%, 60% is US government bonds. So there is still a large margin, a margin of 20 times. So I don't see the rest of the world, it will increase their holding of China's renminbi as a reserve currency as well as a trading currency. But China is the world's largest trading partners to many, many countries, including us, Australia. So it will make sense for us to have a bit of Chinese government bonds. But Chinese government isn't lack of money. That's the problem. So there's no point for them to issue government bonds and pay interest. They have too many money on hand. So, but without increasing government bonds, you just can't invest in renminbis. So the problem at the moment is China isn't providing the necessary pool for the rest of the world to hold renminbi. That is the major problem at the moment. And of course, since China is reducing its holding of US dollars, okay, so if they issue US government bonds, that government bonds will certainly issue in renminbi in order for people to invest in renminbi. So basically what Chinese will say, okay, my government want to borrow, say, 1 million renminbis. Let people around the world to buy that one from me. What can you buy from? You yourself haven't got renminbi on hand. How can you buy Chinese renminbi nominated bonds? Okay, you will say, I use my US dollars and exchange it for renminbi and buy your renminbi nominated bonds. That will increase the number of US dollars held by the Chinese government, which is again is long-term trend to reduce the holding of US dollars. So I don't see a way out here. So I don't know whether the government will be able to find out some way to do it without opening up the financial market for people to invest in renminbi, you won't be able to allow the rest of the world to hold renminbi as a foreign reserve, as well as a trading currency. So that is a big problem. If you want your currency to be a trading currency, you need to run trade deficit. But Chinese has been running trade surpluses. That is a problem. Running trade surplus, that means by trading, people are giving up money to you and not getting your renminbi out. So unless Chinese government reverse that process and say, well, we are willing to run trade deficits. Otherwise, I don't see a risk, a potential of renminbi becoming a international trading currency. So the current system of using US dollars, I think, will remain at least in the next 5 or 10 years.
Supplementary question is that I understand what you've described there in terms of financial assets, in terms of liquidity, trade, etc., the movement of money. I'm not challenging that, but is there anything that's come from the 5 and the 15-year plan that actually indicates what the Chinese government is actually thinking it might want to achieve in that period?
I haven't seen that yet. I haven't seen that in the plan.
And therefore, it could raise levels of suspicion right around the world that with these huge foreign currency reserves, that China might use that as instruments of espionage and torture and destabilization of world affairs, for example, by investing in Africa and investing in Pacific Islands and holding those countries to ransom. That's where it may lead to. If the Chinese government doesn't state what its intentions are, it could actually destabilize the world through finances.
Well, no, I think we have heard of the One Belt One Road project. Anyone haven't heard about One Belt One Road? No.
We'd like to hear more.
Hmm?
Wouldn't mind hearing a bit more about it.
Yeah, if you like, I will prepare for a presentation of One Belt One Road probably in third term. You like, so we will discuss that a bit more in there. In terms of the Chinese investment in the rest of the world, again, that is in line with the reason why Chinese are reducing its foreign reserve in terms of US dollars. The US dollars itself is a fiat money. That means the dollar itself is only issued by the US government without any real asset support. It's printed papers, okay? And therefore, a US government is now in a very good position by printing money and use that money to acquire assets around the world. So they don't need to do anything. Just simply print money and use that money to buy up your assets. That's what's happening at the moment in the rest of the world, okay? And China is holding a lot of these papers. So they want to reduce it while it still has value. So what they do, they use that money, that reserve, and convert it into physical assets in the rest of the world. Now, when they convert it into physical assets, they don't want that physical assets to actually depreciate. They want the assets to appreciate, right? Nobody want to, I invest something and want that something to depreciate. It makes no sense. And therefore, when the Chinese government is investing on a country's infrastructure, for example, a PNG, Chinese government do not want the PNG to go into instabilities and therefore has its assets depreciate. They will more likely to make sure the PNG government is stable and continues to progress by having the prosperity of PNG, then its investment increase in value. So US, Hong Kong, Chinese government investing in the rest of the world, I don't see that as a destabilizing force Rather, I would see it as a stabilizing force because it is in the interest of the Chinese government to make sure the investment they're making is appreciating. And we all know that when an area becomes unstable, its value, assets, all depreciate. That's not what Chinese government wants. So if you want to think carefully, the Chinese government investment in the rest of the world is not a destabilizing force. And there's another interesting is Chinese government do not export its ideology, and Chinese government do not interfere with other people's domestic policies. That is very different from the Western concept of promoting what we think are good values to other people, forcing other people to follow our own ideology. The Chinese government doesn't believe that. It simply do not involve in interfering with other people's domestic policy. And they invest because they want to diversify their papers, their US currency into some physical assets. And in that process, they obviously do not want to see a depreciation of their assets. So I see it as a stabilizing force rather than this unstabilizing force. Yes, please. Can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
You were speaking before about the aging population and just now about assets. Have you heard anything about the purchase of land? I think it's French Island, not the whole island, but part of it, for bringing over elderly Chinese. They're going to rebuild. There's an air landing, not an airport, but possible for planes to land. Have you heard anything about that?
Not that particular project, but I do know that Chinese is trying to invest in a lot of infrastructure projects around the world.
Yes.
That's true. But
and also in Tasmania too, the good farm areas.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
just like
People get a bit anxious sometimes.
Yeah, just like any other companies or any corporation, you want to invest in something you think is valuable.
Yeah.
Like you have money. Yes.
Claire, I think you might be referring to a book called Bruni, which is a fictitious story about the Chinese wanting to buy the mainland of Tasmania and put all the people onto the island of Bruni and build a bridge, so that a physical bridge. I think what you might be referring to.
No, I haven't heard about that. But this is the prison on French Island, I think. They want to buy that and renovate it, you know, and they're going to fly the older people in for R&R. Have you heard of that?
No.
No. But anyway, doesn't matter. I think
Yeah.
it is good for people to mix, isn't it? When we have a
China, yes.
Yeah, mix with China and China mix with you. So I think it's always now the problem with China is it has already a very large population. So for foreigners to gain a citizenship in China is almost next to impossible. Unless you marry some Chinese, otherwise you can't be a Chinese. There's no way you become a Chinese almost.
Right.
And also Chinese has a very large people living outside China, just like myself. I'm an ethnic Chinese, but I'm an Australian, okay? So there's a huge amount of Chinese, it's called aspirator, that's people outside China, okay? There's a huge population. And therefore we are already acting as a bridge between us and China. And well, with people who have been living in other countries, let's say for a few generations as bridges, that helps China. There's no point of breaking that bridge. And by having all other Chinese say, I want to live in Western countries, hey, you go. We don't want to stop you because we are running out of space anyway. So if you want to immigrate, go ahead. Chinese government is not stopping you. Yes. Yes.
Do you think China will reverse its restrictions on Australian trade, whether it be lobsters or barley or whatever in the near future?
Unless our government change its stance. If our government doesn't change its stand, then I don't think Chinese government will change. So it is a two-way street. If our government continue to accuse of the Chinese government, there's no point to change the trade policy. Put it that way, if we want to go to a restaurant, and when the restaurant, being a customer, the restaurant owners keep on criticizing you or blaming you for this and that, etc., you don't want to visit that restaurant. If the service isn't good, why you have to do business with that person? Same here for countries. If they are, the unfortunate thing is the things we sell is not unique in the world. There are other alternate supply. So in order to maintain a good customer, we need a good relationship. But when our government is poking the eyes of the dragons, obviously we suffer, unfortunately.
Albert, just some follow-up comments about a couple of commentary in recent times around this table, is that firstly, in the areas which have been affected in terms of our trade with China, it only represents 1 or 2% of the total. Last year, our total volume of exports to China increased. Now, most of that was through iron ore and so forth. So it's a political issue. It's not an economic issue.
Yeah.
Going back to the issue of the selling of Tasmania to the Chinese, most of the land that was sold to the Chinese in the last couple of years was foreign owned anyhow. Australians never owned it.
Really?
So that's a fact of the matter. A third thing is that at least until recent times, when I last saw the statistics, that Belgium had more foreign direct investment in Australia than China did. Why are we worried about China and not worried about the Belgians?
Yes.
Good points. Thank you. Well, any other questions? We overrun it for a little bit, but if you are okay, I'm okay. Now, I think I sent out the email saying that next week we will have this as well. But now I understand that next week is a public holiday, so we won't have the presentation next week. So it will skip next week, and then there will be 2 presentations coming up. The next presentation is about the reduction of poverty. Okay, so that we know that China have achieved what they call elimination of poverty, meaning they claim that there is no person living under $2.30 US dollars per day by 2020. So they said they already achieved that. So we will look at that, look at how they evaluate this and what are the lessons we learned from Chinese effort. So that will be the next presentation after next week. And again, if there's no problem, then thank you very much for your attention, and then we'll see you
2 weeks.
How do we call that? Monday.
2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you.